Okay, I'm recording and this is week 6. And we're going to finish talking about creating our landscapes and our world building tools today by finishing talking about procedural content generation inside of Unreal Engine. And then I'm going to start talking about creating dynamic gameplay by showing you how to do item pickups and be able to keep track of that with variables, and then we'll open a door with it. So just like we did with the Fortnite game. So we're going to see how you can do that inside of Unreal Engine blueprints. I'm going to start today by looking at my project here, which I have worked on a little bit since we last saw it. So I did continue painting the landscape here. And I've added a lot of procedurally generated meshes, Megascan meshes to it. And it looks, it looks less nice in this view than when I actually play it, because when I play it, my skylight kicks in and I actually get the really nice blue shadows and everything, and the individual Megascan pieces start blending in more with the landscape. And so if I run around here, it does look like a snowy landscape. Fits my aesthetic. And there's quite a few different materials on here, as far as you can see that there's ice over here on the landscape. There's sort of trampled snow in some places. I've got some other places that have more rock type of textures and glacier textures. And then I've got some with grass coming through the snow, and then actual meshes for grass as well. So in order to make the landscape look better, I used the painting tool in landscape that we talked about last time. And if I go into that painting tool, you can see that I have all my layers here. I did add layers to it. I only did like 4 last class, but I added a couple of more so that I have 6, because I wanted to have some something for the trampled snow and for the glacier. I just think the more you have of those, the more variety you have, the more natural your landscape is going to look. I will say this, that when I added those 2 other in there, by going into the material that I created last time, the layer blend material. So here's the one that we did in class. And in order to add a couple of more, I had to duplicate the material functions that I already created last time to create a couple more and label them accordingly. So if I open one of those, that's the one that has the master material in it that we just had to go in and change names on. So in this case, it's for the tracks in the snow. And I added tracks to the names of my albedo and my other ARD, which is roughness and the normal map, as well as my tiling, which I set up last time with the scalar node going into a multiply node. And that also has tracks in the name, and also setting down lower here in this is the group. So if I select that, you can see that there is a tracks layer group. So by making those, changing those names in here and setting a new group called tracks layer, that will come up as a new section, a new group in my material instance when I add it to the material. So first I create the material function and save it. And then I go into the material that we made last time, and I go to the landscape layer blend node, and it had 4 things in it, and I added 2 more over here in the details by adding to the array that I had. So this is an array. It had 0 through 3 before, and I hit plus a couple more times to add a couple more members of that array, index 4 and 5, and went in and named that tracks and glacier. And then those come up here as a layer tracks and a layer glacier. And then I duplicated the material function call that we created last time and plugged in the material function that I saved over here in the details, and then connected it to the appropriate layer in the landscape layer blend node. So it goes from the material function call, which gets the material function, puts it into the array here of layers. That goes into your break material attributes and into the material blend output. And so if you do that and you save it, you compile and save it. Actually, you don't have to compile, just save it and close that. Then if you open up your material function, you should have new groups in there. And it does these according to, it orders them according to the name. So it basically does it alphabetically. So my glacier, even though I added it at the end, comes up first in my list here. And you turn those on and plug in the material from the Megascan or the texture from the Megascan by putting this out in your interface so you can see it. Like this. Let me just go back to this one. There we go. And turning it on, and then finding the Megascan surface that you're using. In this case, it's for my glacier, so I would find the glacier one, and I would select the color texture map and hit the little arrow to put it in there. Select the normal texture map, click the arrow to bring the blue one in, and then the last one I usually do is the roughness one. So plug each one of those in, turn them on first, and then plug them in and save it. And when you come in here then to the landscape mode paint, you should see those extra layers. But there was a catch because it wasn't updating. I had to save my project, close it, and open it again to see them come up in here. It was not updating when I added to those 2 extra layers until I closed the program and launched it again. So I would recommend doing that. Then I started painting with it. When you're painting with it, I know there's times where it seems like it's not working. Make sure that, see, when I come in here, I'm on the base layer. And so sometimes if I'm painting and it doesn't seem to be working, I'll switch layers. I'll try the details layer. I'll try the landmass layer. I'll jump around on the layers to see if it kicks in. And usually it does. Sometimes it takes it a little while to show up. Sometimes I think it's just a little bit, you know, it lags as far as updating goes. But it did show up eventually. I kept painting with it. I kept working with it, clicking on the different layers, painting, and ultimately it worked correctly. Now, sometimes when it seems to not be working, I'll again save the program or save the project, close the program, open it back up again, and sometimes that forces it to update and work correctly. But ultimately, it was working fine. I was able to paint all my layers. So working with this layer blend material node and in the paint landscape mode section should give you a pretty organic looking background depending on what you're trying to do for your island. The more you paint and blend stuff, the more organic it's going to look, the more natural it's going to look, generally speaking. And then that's just going to be the base. If you really want this to look good, you've got to put some meshes in there. And I've got a bunch of meshes in here because I created the procedural generated volume that fits around this entire area. You can kind of see it at the top there. So if I go select that, if I go back out of this mode to selection mode, and I find my PCG volume and select it, you can see that there is a lot of stuff, a lot of yellow in my scene here. A lot of grass, a lot of objects. I manually only maybe put a couple of things into this scene. Like that big iceberg out in the water. It's not yellow. I placed that manually because I wanted something to be right there. I didn't want it to just randomly come up. I wanted something right there in the water. So I placed it and I see a big clump of snow right there. It's meant to be a little clump of snow, but I scaled it up the size of an iceberg and stuck it there. It looks fine. But everything else is randomly generated. And then you'll notice right here, there's nothing. And that's because I'm using an exclusion volume to cut out all the procedurally generated stuff from that area. And the reason I'm going to do that is because that's where I'm going to put my little hut, my little station that's going to have the door and everything. And I don't want trees and grass and stuff coming through the floor. I don't want a big boulder coming through the floor. So I'm excluding out. If you have things like roads or areas that you don't want any procedurally generated stuff in, then you need to exclude it out. And I have this object here. It's just a big cube. If I find it's called exclude volume 1. If I unhide it, because I turned the visibility off, if I turn the visibility back on, you'll see it. It's a big cube intersecting with the landscape there. And I colored it. I just put a red material on it. So wherever that's intersecting, if I hide it again, that's where it's not drawing the grass and the trees and the rocks and all of the other stuff. So that exclusion stuff is kind of important if you want to control this procedurally generated content a little bit. So I'll show you how to make that today. So let's take a look at the PCG graph. This is my PCG graph. You can see that it's bigger than it was last week. It's more complicated looking, but it's really not that complicated. Now, at the end of the video last week, I only had a few of these objects being spawned. And they were just the base nodes, which are 3 nodes. So, and right here, I've added 3 more nodes to almost all of these. So the base nodes are the surface sampler and transform points. And normally they would go all the way over to the static mesh spawner. And these 3 here, which I've added in here, would be cut out of that. They wouldn't be there. So those 3 nodes are what's removing content or excluding content. And I've got them on most of these lines because I do want to take away the content for a lot of these things. So the places where you're going to want to get rid of content, there's 2 main areas, or maybe 3 main areas. One of the areas is you might have a section like I have here, a big section that you want to put a house or something on there, or it's a road or something. So you don't want boulders and trees or rocks and whatever you have going on that area. That excludes everything. And so you have to actually create some kind of object to tell it what area to exclude. Do I hear someone talking in here? Hey, when I'm lecturing like this, you shouldn't be having a conversation unless it's about this. Are you guys talking about troubleshooting the project or something? Okay. So yeah, if you're troubleshooting the project, okay, that's fine. So to get to this point, you have to decide, okay, what meshes am I going to need to put across my landscape? And then you have to tweak your settings. You're going to need the 3 nodes that I talked about to place those meshes across your landscape. And like, for instance, I'll just get rid of, on this one, this is my big rocks. And you'll notice that I've organized this according to large snow mounds at the top, medium snow mounds and piles in the second one. Third one is medium chunks and piles. Next one is grass and small snow chunks. And then the last 2 are small snow chunks and trees, and then large tree stumps. So I got a lot, right? It's a lot of stuff. It's really, each one of those doesn't have that many things under it. I think the grass one has the most. It has like 4 things under it. Most of those just have 1 or 2 things. And so it's really only about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 it's maybe 12 different models I'm working with here to place across the landscape, like 3 different kinds of grasses, a couple different kinds of snow chunks, and then these big piles of snow and big mounds of snow. But they come in naturally at different sizes from Megascans. And so if you put them together into one section, you only have a way to control a particular section by the transform points node. And the transform points node has things like, how are you going to offset it? How are you going to do the rotation on it? And most importantly, the min and max scale. And so you want to create a bunch of things and rotate them all 360 degrees. So the rotation one is pretty much consistent with all of these the same. It goes from 0 to 360. But the offset and the scale, that changes. Because if it's a really big thing and maybe it has a flared out base, I'm going to want to push it down into the ground quite a bit. Otherwise, that edge is going to stick up in some places. If it's not on a perfectly flat surface, it's going to stick out and look wrong. So I'm going to push it down a lot. And if I push it down 100 units, that's fine for a really big thing. But for a really small thing, that puts it under the ground. So you don't put a really small thing with a really big thing on the same layer, because the small things are going to get pushed down under the ground, or they're going to be so small that you don't see them. And then it's just a waste. Like you're creating a bunch of stuff in your scene and you can't even see it. So you want to do this carefully. You want to think about and bring the Megascans into your scene and see how big they are. And the big things you want to put together, and the small things you want to put together. So I'm putting really small rocks with my grass, because really small rocks, I'm not going to push them down at all, and neither am I going to push down grass. And the scale is going to be similar over here in the scale settings. You won't know what the scale is until you try it. Like, you don't know what's going to look good in your scene until you actually plug some numbers in here. You probably start with 1 and go from there. Sometimes if it's really big, you want to make it smaller. Like in these cases, I'm making these big mounds smaller. They're like 0.3 and 0.7 max. So it's smaller than 1 because they were just too big. But when you get down to the grass and you look at my grass layer transform points node, it might have totally different numbers, or it might have similar numbers. Depends on, I actually did not want my grass to be very big in this scene, so I am actually making it smaller, because I figured, it's not going to have that much grass in a snowy landscape. I want it to look like just some dead pieces, stragglers of grass coming up. I didn't want it to look like lush grass. So if you're doing lush grass, maybe you'd make it bigger, and you'd certainly make it more of it in the surface sampler, because the surface sampler is the other one which is going to have a very different effect on big things than on small things. If you have small things like grass, a lot of times you do want to pump up the numbers of points per square meter because you want a lot of grass. But if you did that with rocks, you're in big rocks, your whole landscape would be covered in rocks and you wouldn't even be able to see your landscape. So my big objects have a very, very small points per square meter, 0.005, and my grass objects have a larger one, like 10 or 30 or something like that, depending on how much grass you want. Also, the point extents, that sometimes changes based on the object. If it's a really big object, you probably have a bigger number in there. That's kind of the space that rock inhabits. And then the looseness might change too, depending on what type of object it is. putting a lower number looks like it does more covered area, and putting a larger number makes it clump a little bit more in some cases. So, just a lot of this is trial and error. See what looks good, you do it, and you'll see all your stuff move around. That does happen with this. So when you're setting your surface samplers, which is the very first thing that you create when you do a PCG graph, those settings are going to change everything for that particular object. So if I plug in a different number, like a 30 instead of 10 here, all of my things are going to move around. And so it's different that if I'm on the transform points, which is the one that this surface sampler goes into, this will just make small changes. Like it won't move them. They'll stay where they are, and they'll just get bigger or smaller, or they'll go down into the ground a little bit more. So it's just little adjustments. And then that, in the last video that the last week demo that I did, we went straight into, from the transform points over to the static mesh spawner. So I'll just do that. If I break these connections on either side of these 3 nodes here, by holding Alt down and clicking on it, break that connection there, and I'll break that connection there. And then I'll just move these 3 out of the way up here, and we'll connect it again. So that's how we did it last class. And in that case, it's going to, you look in the area, the empty area, I might see those objects coming back again. Because, and maybe there were none of those objects in this area. But that basically cut out the exclusion stuff for that particular object. And we can go ahead and, let me just save it, and we'll cut out these ones too, because I think these ones are more noticeable. So let's do that. Let's cut this one out as well. So I'm just going to get these couple of nodes back to the way they were last class. Okay, so that should have taken away all those mid-level, medium-sized chunks. And we can just, I can remake these. I'll just delete these nodes. Okay, and hook this back up again. Okay, so sometimes after you make a big change, you might want to do a force regen, and you might want to go find your PCG landscape node and do a cleanup generate in the details. So down here, cleanup generate. Cleanup will everything will disappear. So now I actually see the whole surface that I painted without any procedural generated content on it, and generate will bring it back again. So if you're thinking that, wondering if something's updating, then you could try. And you can see that now I've got some of those medium-sized rocks in that area that I was excluding from. I didn't do the grass, so there's no grass in there. It's still excluding the grass. So let's look at how we can create these nodes. And I'll just do it for, I'll do it for this area here. And the reason why you would want to do it, it's, you can really see it right there. I've got like those things being generated right on my mountaintop and right on the sides of my mountain. They don't look right at all. They look like they're just stuck on there because they got a flat bottom, and they're only going to look good on the areas that are pretty flat. So that's one area that you're going to want to exclude from, is if you have any mountains, you may not want things growing on the slopes of the mountains because it will look wrong. It just doesn't look right. So I can easily see that's what's happening there. These medium-sized piles are being generated up there on the mountain slopes. So I want to exclude that. And the way you're going to exclude that is using a difference node. So I break the connection. Let's just try breaking the connection here. And you see they all disappear. It's not generating them now because it's not getting to the static mesh spawner, which has the actual meshes in there. So I'm going to go out from my transform points node and add in a new node. And it's a difference node. So type in DIF, you'll find difference, and bring it up. And you won't see anything immediately with that. There is something that you need to set on that. You should change the density function, which is the very first thing in that node. Change it from minimum to binary. That's important. You have to change it to binary. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. So it's a mathematical calculation in that it's going to look for some sort of delineation of where on the surface you want to exclude these objects' point structure, their mesh. So to do it on the slopes, you're going to go out of that difference node to a normal to density node, normal to density. And you don't really have to do anything with that node. That's just to sort of filter the nodes into a density filter. So go out of that and type in density again and just choose density filter. And then go into the in of the static mesh again. So I basically, and everything should look the same because I haven't really done anything to it. What I've done is I've inserted 3 nodes in between the transform points and static mesh nodes. All right, so originally all we had was 3 nodes: surface sampler, transform points, static mesh, and that drew a bunch of stuff on our screen, or put a procedurally generated a bunch of stuff on our landscape. And we're inserting in between the transform points where you determine how big the objects are that you're placing, and the static mesh where you actually draw the object or get the object that you're going to place. So this difference node is for sort of taking what the calculation of what is going to be drawn and cutting out of it the difference of it. So mathematically, and in this density scale, there is a lower bound and an upper bound, and that's what you're going to mess with. So what it's doing is it's saying from 0.5, or actually 1 is the upper bound, that's completely flat. That's flat ground in your scene. And 0 is vertical. And 0.5 is halfway, so that's about 45 degrees. So 90 degrees for 0. 1 is horizontal on your surface. So if you have it set from 0.5 to 1, that means that it will not draw it will draw up to about 45 degrees. If I set this, if I put it more towards 1, so let's say I put 0.9, you notice that all of those ones that were up on my slope are gone now. Because what I've told it to do is that only draw this in that 0.1 amount from flat. So everything that's flat and kind of almost flat, it's going to draw these large pieces, and anything else is not going to be drawn. Why did it? Sorry, this just turned off for some reason. So yeah, my machine is fine. It's the projector that just turned off. And we'll turn it back on. I don't know if it's getting overheated or what. So you're going to, unless you want things to be drawn on very steep slopes, you're going to set this lower bound number probably not lower than 0.5. That's going to be a fairly steep slope. If you set it to 0.5, it will still draw things on there. Between that and 1, if you put 1, then it's not going to draw it anywhere. Okay. So you have to sort of judge what's going to be the best for that. Try and turn it back on again. And that's basically what I'm doing here, is I'm going through and finding what I think is going to be the right setting for that. For this particular one, I might have used, let me try 0.8. 0.8 actually puts it I saw a couple come up on my lower slopes. But then I get a few that look a little weird on the other side of my other mountains. And so for this particular one, because it's so big, I think 0.95 is what I would use. If I look at all my slopes, I don't really want it to draw this one on any of the steep slopes. Okay, I'm gonna have to go get someone about this. I'm gonna pause the recording. Okay, so we've got the projector kind of working, or at least a replacement working. And so I've inserted these 3 nodes to deal with excluding content from the slopes of my world. And so that some of the things that are coming up on the slopes are not going to come up on the slopes. So it's working fine for that particular one. It took off some of the ones that looked really weird on top of the world. So if I want to add those 3 up here to keep the same thing from happening with the other one, the other large piece, I don't need to create each one of these nodes from scratch again. I can just copy these 3 nodes. So difference to normal to density filter. I can go do a Control C after selecting them, go to the top here, and paste them down. Control V, and we add 3 nodes in there. And of course, you know, they're not connected yet. But the nice thing about that is because I set another large object to the right numbers. So these will probably be pretty close, and there's not that much to set in there anyway. So it's probably not really too much of an issue or too difficult either way. I'm going to just delete these ones that I had before because I'm not going to use them. And I'll insert these 3 into this connection. So I need to first break this connection. I'll hold Alt down and break it. And then I'll go from out into the source of the difference node. And then I'll go on the other side from the out of the density filter to the in of the static mesh spawner. And I saw a bunch of these come back. This one's set to almost about the same thing that the other one was set to that I cut out of there. It was using 0.9 instead of 0.95, so I'll just put 0.9 back in there and hit enter and go with that. And just look around and make sure that I don't have anything weird happening on top of my mountains or on the slopes of my mountains. So, you know, that's something that you can create for any procedural object that you're putting in here. Like for instance, I've got grass and small snow chunks. I've got in my static mesh spawner where you have your arrays of all your different objects. I've got four array indexes in this. If I collapse it, you can see I've got 0, 1, 2, 3. The first 3 are different pieces of grass. So if you're bringing grass into your world, you're going to bring it from Bridge, and you can type in grass with your search under 3D assets. You can type in grass, and I'm going to get some stuff that is not going to be grass. Actually, 3D plants is what I want to use, not 3D assets. Make sure you use the plants instead. And you can see there's all these different types of grass. And when you choose a grass, when you click on one, you can see I chose this one. It's got a check. The wild grass is what I'm using. And you download it. You don't just get one piece of grass. You get like 7 or 10 or 12 different kinds of grass. And you have to choose which ones you want to spawn into there. So for mine, for the wild grass that I downloaded, they're numbered. So I'm using 3 of those wild grass in these arrays. And one of them is variation 6. And another one is variation 4. And the other one I'm using is variation 1. So 1, 4, and 6. And if I go in my scene, my content browser, and I look for the wild grass under my Megascans 3D plants, I only have one, so it's easy to find. If I look in there, you're going to have your static mesh for each one. So this one's variation 1 right here. And you're going to want to open those up and just take a look at them. And if you're putting these things all over your landscape and you're doing hundreds of them, if not thousands of them, you may want to turn on nanite support. Nanite support is what allows you to have sort of dynamic interpolation of your meshes depending on where your camera is. And it allows you to have all of these landscape things in your scene without your scene slowing down. So you can see that actually for my mesh 1 here, I don't have nanite support turned on. I should probably do that. I'll go ahead and turn it on for this. There's other things that you might want to look at in here, the LODs you might want to set. You'll notice that when you walk around your landscape, especially with grass, it will noticeably change look as you get closer to it. So the really nice grass look, which is LOD 0, only goes a certain distance from the camera. And then it switches to LOD 1 or 3 or whatever is the next LOD that it has in the grass. And it's noticeable. Like as you're walking, you'll see your grass change. And it looks weird. It doesn't look good. And it does that for performance, but if you don't have a whole lot, if you're not having a problem with performance, it would be good to come in here and just set your LOD down to 0. And the way you do that with these grass pieces is you go in and find where it says number of LODs, and like this normally by default says 3. So when I'm looking up across my landscape, I see level 0 grass, and then I see level like 3 grass or level 4 grass. And there's a big difference between those two levels. And it's noticeable. And as I walk towards the grass across the landscape, I see it continuously changing. I think it looks bad. So if I set that down to 1, number of LODs to 1, then it has to only use the 0 LOD. And it all looks the same, like your grass will all look the same no matter how much you move. So that's something that I did previously already said in here. So you want to turn that down, number of LODs probably down to 1. And I found that takes that away, that sort of dynamic LOD change that looks weird on grass. Make sure you save it after you make those changes, and then you can close it. It might ask you this. I noticed that when you turn on nanite on Megascans objects, it always asks you this afterwards, even though you saved it. When you try to close it, would you like to apply level of detail changes to the grass? Just say yes. And then if I go out on my landscape and I look around, I've turned nanite on a lot of things here. If I hit escape so that we're not looking at what's selected anymore, and I go to my my 3D view, if I change it from lit to nanite visualization triangles, I'll see what's nanites in my scene. And you can see that I've turned those different objects, the ones that have the colored triangles, those are nanites. And I know that if I have nanites on there, that it will not slow down my scene, no matter how many I get in there, no matter how many I put, it's not going to slow down. And it's going to look better as well, because when I get close to things, it's going to look the highest quality level 0 LOD. And when I'm far away, it's going to make it the lowest quality. I'm going to switch back to lit. And then I'm going to, I could look through some of these other ones that I'm using, but that's where you want to go to the static meshes. And then you can also go into the actual texture maps and take a look at them, or see the individual static meshes here too. Okay, I'm gonna talk about one last thing with this, and that's excluding areas of your mesh that, well, there's two other things that you might want to do with exclusions. One is you may not want your grass coming through large rocks. If I have some big rocks on there, or if I have some surfaces on there, you may want the grass to go around them rather than be under them. My grass is not so bad because it's not that long, but if you're using long grass, it'll go all the way through the large rocks. It'll look funny. And you can exclude that by using the same nodes that you set up for slopes. So this is my grass layer right here, this one that has this bounds modifier. And the bounds modifier is coming from a couple of different, has some inputs from a couple of different things. One is coming from up here where my large rocks are being created. It's coming out of the transform points and going into this bounds modifier. And what the bounds modifier does is it lets me adjust the scale of the points till it cuts out the area that the whatever's going into it is sitting in. So in this case, large rocks. I want to take the transform points, which actually has the size of the large rocks, but sometimes you have to actually modify that a little bit to make it get tight around it. And you won't actually know what those numbers are. But if I look down here at some of these things, let me just zoom into this one, for instance. All right. So I can see that it's kind of coming a little bit around the rocks here or into the rocks here. And I might want to adjust that so that it comes out, so it's away from the rock a little bit, the grass and things like that. And so I can go into this bounds modifier and adjust these numbers. I put 5 in there because I started with 1 and did trial and error to see what would start to push it away from the rock. It's going into the difference node of the grass, so it's affecting the grass and the small rocks. And there's more than one going into that. I've also got the small snow chunks and trees going into it. So basically trying to make the grass not grow through the small snow chunks and trees as well. But what I do is adjust this minimum and max. And we could put in like, let's try 7. And you see one of the grasses disappeared that was close to it. So if I start putting all 7 in all of these, then I might notice some of these grass pieces disappearing from this large rock. And a lot of them did. There's like 1 still coming out of it. So I could go higher. I could put 10 or something like that, or 8. I want it to be fairly tight. I mean, I don't want it to necessarily be far away from them. And I'm still actually, you know what? That's something else. That's not grass. That's a small tree. So yeah, that's a small tree. So it kind of worked. It pushed the grass so that it's out here away from that mound and not going through the mound. And you do that by going into the difference node of whatever it is that you want to cut out from the landscape, from a particular part of the landscape, and it goes through a bounds modifier. Okay, the other one that you would want to do is exclude an entire area. So if I want to exclude an entire area, I'm doing it down here. And I do it with objects. So the volume of an object, like a cube or a sphere, something like that. So I have one with the cube. let's do one in a different area with, let's say, a sphere. See if that works. So let's say in my landscape here, I would like to not have anything coming up over here where I have some water. So let's say I don't want there to be grass or anything coming up in my water. So I currently have grass coming up in my water. You can see it there, and I can see some stumps and some other things coming up in my water. So I would like to exclude this area from this content generation. So I would add to my scene some kind of 3D object. Let's do a shapes sphere in this case. I'm going to do a sphere. So I got this sphere in there, and I'm going to name it. Yeah. Was that a question? No. Sorry. I heard something. So I called my first one exclude volume 1. That was my cube. I'm going to do this one and call it exclude volume 2. Exclude volume 2. Okay, so I should see it coming up in my outliner close to exclude volume 1. And the main thing about this, to make this work, is that it's going to work based on a tag. I did make it a color, which you don't really have to do, but I just colored it so it'd be easier to see it. Because I'm going to hide it anyway, it doesn't matter if you color it. But most things are white in my scene, so making it a white object just makes it hard to see. So I put a red color on the material, and I'm going to go in and do a search for tag, T-A-G. And I want to find actor tags. It's an array. I'm going to click the plus button to add to that array. And then I'm going to click where it says none. And I'm going to type in a word that is going to be my tag. I'm going to type in exclude. All lowercase, enter. So when I put an exclude tag on this, it's going to use that to do the exclusion based on the size of this object and what it's intersecting with. So it's going to look for this exclude tag. And I'll just go and scale this so it's going to fit the area that I don't want the content coming up in. And we don't have to leave it a sphere. We can make it sort of oblong. I want it to be pretty big, so I'll go ahead and fly upwards so I can see what I'm doing here, and scale it a little bit this way. Move it. Go ahead and scale the whole thing a little bit. All right, so it's covering a pretty large area. Push it down into the ground a little bit, like that. So I've covered up a whole area of my landscape here. And I'll go ahead and go over to this object and type in VIS for Viz, and turn off the visible channel so you can't see it under rendering. So it's there, it's just invisible. It's got the tag and it's intersecting the surface in that entire area. Then I want to go back to my PCG landscape, and I want to create the controls for this. So I have them already here, and I'll go ahead and just delete these ones so that we can recreate it again. So I'll just select these, hit delete. And I'm gonna create some new ones. So this is gonna be my exclusion zone. I'll right click, type in surface sampler because I need that to start with. And we'll go out of that. And what that's going to go into, if I pull that out, just type in like tag, the word tag, and you'll find intersect with tagged actor geometry. You want to select that. That's what's going to make this work. And you have to plug the surface sampler into your landscape. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it out of landscape. Incidentally, I'm also using landscape height for one of my things. It's the large tree stumps. Landscape height makes everything that it draws perpendicular or straight up in world space. So, for instance, if you're doing things like trees, which my large tree stumps are kind of like trees, it's going to make the trees go vertical instead of coming out perpendicular to the landscape. So if you're on a hill, and you are procedurally generating trees and you use the landscape one, your trees on the hill are going to be pointing to the side, right? They're going to be crooked. And if you want crooked trees, that's fine. But for trees, when they grow on the side of a hill, normally they grow straight up. They don't grow out crooked, perpendicular to the hill. So smaller plants will do that, but trees generally go straight up. And so if you're doing trees, you might want to use, instead of connecting your surface sampler to landscape, you might want to use the landscape height, which will actually make them go vertical instead of perpendicular to the surface normals. Okay, just wanted to mention that. I'm going to hook to landscape for this particular thing. And I want to start with, looking at this area that I placed that large sphere, I want to see that it's going to cover that area without any gaps. So to do that, you go to your intersect with tagged actors geometry node, right click it and turn on debug. And you'll see the area that the sphere was covering. Actually, it's showing me everything because I haven't put the tag in yet. So let me type in the tag first. Where is it? Under actor tags, I'm going to hit plus. It's an array again, so actor tags plus, and I'm going to type in the tag exclude exactly as I wrote it in the other one, same casing and everything, so it's lowercase e, and hit enter. And now you can see that it's actually only showing me that area that I put the cube in there. So that's what I wanted. And it's got spaces in between the cubes, the visualization cubes. I don't want that because I want to exclude everything in this area. So the way you fix that is go to your surface sampler, type in 0 in points per square meter, and type in, I'm sorry, 1 in points per square meter and 0 in looseness. And it'll show you that it's covering that area. Now it's showing me both the area that I have a cube, because they're both using the same tag. So it's showing me a square where I have the cube, and the sphere where I have the sphere placed. And it's covering that area without any gaps. So now I just have to plug it in to the difference nodes on the things that I want to exclude from those areas. So if I don't want grass, for instance, let's go find where I have my grass and trees, and let's drag that up and connect it to the differences channel on the difference node. So let me just zoom out a little bit, and we'll go from this out, and I'll just turn off the debug stuff so we can see what's going on. And we'll go from this out of the intersect with tagged actors geometry to that differences input. And if I zoom into that area, let's just try zooming in. I don't see the grass anymore there. Okay, let's try another one. Let's get rid of these little stumpy things. Okay, well, those are my small snow chunks and trees. So we see some snow chunks, we see some trees. Let's go into the difference node for that. And you see they disappear. Now I have none of those there. And that might be all I want to do. Maybe I want to leave my big things there, but I actually probably don't. So we'll go ahead and drag it to some of the other things too. I know I don't need any stumps there either, so I'll go ahead and drag to my stump differences node. And you notice that on the stumps one, I only have a differences node. I don't have the normal to density filter because I decided I didn't care about the stumps being on the slopes. But if I wanted to, I could put those other two nodes in there. Easy to copy and paste them and insert them there. And then if I don't want some of these large rocks and things in that area either, I think they kind of look a little bit cool, but I don't think I definitely don't want them where I want to build my house. So and I could do a separate tag for that, right? I use the same tag for both these objects, so I have to use the same exclusion nodes here. So we can select these two nodes and hit C to comment this, and we'll call this exclusion zone 1. Okay, so that's my exclusion zone 1. But I could make an exclusion zone 2 by using a different tag. And that way, if I wanted to leave things differently, like leave some of these large pieces in this water area, but not have anything over here in the build area, then I could do that with 2 separate exclusion zones. But let's just go ahead and connect it for now to the same thing. So again, I just go to differences on some of these other ones. And I saw the medium chunks and piles just disappear. And let's do another one. We'll go up to the, and that took away the medium snow mounds and piles. We'll do one more. Okay, so if I look in these areas, that circular area should be free of anything. That one right there I placed manually, and these look like they're a little bit out of the zone. But the build zone, which is right there, is free of anything. There's a little bit in between where the build zone is and where I put the sphere under the water. Okay, so that's exclusion zones. And I just connected that to these difference nodes. All right, I'm going to save this. All right, there's one more thing I wanted to mention, and that has to do with the building I was talking about. So I'm going to zoom down closer to the ground here. And what I want is to build something in this area right here. And there's a procedural modeling tool which you could use to build structures. You're going to find that Megascans does not have as much stuff as you had in Fortnite. Fortnite has lots of complete buildings and stuff. Megascans does not have that. It has some walls, it has some doors, it has some different objects for a scene, but it doesn't have complete buildings, and the walls don't always work for what you're doing. So you're going to want to build some structures, and there's a modeling tool that will allow you to procedurally build some base structures that you can then enhance with your Megascans. So let me show you what I mean. Let's say I want to build something right here, like a hut or a facility or something. And so I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch from this selection mode to modeling mode. Modeling mode is built in. It's not, it used to be a plugin, but now it's just built in there. And if you switch to modeling mode, you will get these modeling tools coming up. And one of the things in here that you probably want to use is this cube grid. If I click on cube grid and then I put my cursor in the scene, you'll notice that I get all these squares on my landscape coming up. And I can change the size of those squares. Let's go down here and just pull this out so I can see it better. Okay, so you have current block size. It's currently set to 100. I might want to go bigger or smaller. It's up to you. Whatever you think is going to allow you. If you go smaller, if I go to 50, for instance, I'm going to see smaller highlights of smaller grids come up. It will allow you to more finely choose a certain area. If you kind of have a really large area you're trying to do, you might want to go a little bigger than that. Say I leave it on 100 for now, and I try to sort of go within this bounded area that I created here with my cube. So let's just start maybe right here, and I'll go up, and I'll just kind of try to delineate an area that I think is going to be good for this structure. Kind of like that. And then you have some tools here called pull and push. They also correspond with the E and the Q key. And pull is going to push it up. So if I hit pull or I hit E on my keyboard, it's going to push the structure up. And I can make it however big I want to make it. Maybe a little bigger than that. Let's go one more level. All right, so that gives me this structure. If I zoom upwards, you can kind of see what it looks like there. And if I want to carve out an inside to it, then I can do that by using these same tools. So let's say I switch this to maybe 25, so I get really sort of smaller squares, because I don't want the walls to be that thick. Maybe you want your walls to be thick, but however thickness you want the walls to be, that's how big you want to make the grid. And then I can sort of select this entire area here, everything but the edge or the last square, and I can push that back down. And I can hit Q on my keyboard and push it down until I get close to the bottom. And it's kind of hard for me to tell, so maybe I want to go down until I can see where that is and keep hitting Q until I get close to the bottom, like right above the bottom. And then if I go back up again, I can see that I've carved the inside of that out. And I can go in and add a roof back by selecting across this edge here. From there, and then pulling across, and again, it's E key. I can just go faster to push it all the way across. Now I have a roof. All right, so it's carved out inside. So if I want to go back down, let me just set my my camera movement a little slower. So if I go back down, I can carve out a door here. So let's say, let's go back a little bit more. Let's say I want a door right here, and maybe I want even finer control, so I can put it down to 10 and drag what would be the shape of a door. Let's just say something like that. I don't know if that's a good size. I'll just use it, and then I'll I want to push that. So I'm going to push that back. I'm going to keep pushing it back until I see it pop out a hole. All right, then maybe we want some windows on either side. We can put those in there too. Put some small windows. Again, push it back. That's the Q key till you see it pop out. Maybe we'll go to the other side and cut a big window over here. Big picture window there. May not be what I actually want, but now if I hit play, by the way, a couple other things. It looks like I didn't hide that big sphere. There's a couple of things on the sphere, the exclude volume 2, I need to set. One is the visibility needs to be turned off so I don't see it. But the other one is that I don't want to collide into it as an invisible barrier. But right now I will. If I run up to it, I'll just stop. So I need to go to collisions and turn collisions off on this object. So you can type in COL to get to the collision area and change it from the default to no collision. And that way I can run right through it. It won't be an invisible barrier to me. So let me hit play and take a look at the structure I just created. Oh, wait, sorry. Go back to it. I didn't hit okay, did I? Let me go back to my cube grid. Hopefully I didn't lose it. So I don't see it there, but I'm going to go ahead and hit accept and see if it shows up. Actually, it didn't show up. All right, I guess I lost it. That's fine. I'll just create it again. And probably it's probably that this one is not accepting the changes that I made to it because I was in modeling mode and not in select mode. So yeah, should have checked the collisions. Okay, collisions took. Yeah, so I don't see it in my outliner, so I think I lost what I was building there. Okay, that's fine. I'll just build it again real quick. Because huh, that's weird. Cancel. Okay. So what I think happened was I had my sphere selected when I went into modeling mode, and I think it connected my model to the sphere that I created for the exclusion zone. So just be aware of that. You might want to make sure that you don't have anything selected when you go into that to create something new. So after you finish creating whatever it is you're creating, make sure you hit accept. And then you can check it out by hitting play and go back to selection mode so we have a bigger window. See what it looks like. It's kind of floating up in the air, so I'm going to need to move it down. I see that I actually did lose the floor there. Went a little bit too far down. So we'll go ahead and fix that. So this object is too high up. Go ahead and move it down a bit. And I might want to flatten this ground out a little bit more. It's not as flat as I thought it was going to be. Got a little bit of an angle to it. Um, so I'm gonna I might want to make a separate floor for it. Or if this is like a shed, maybe this would look okay, like it has snow inside of it, but we could go in and create another floor. Probably from this side. And push it across. Or pull it across. At some point, it's going to go under that snow. Now, when you're done, I'd want to put some stairs probably going up to that from Megascans. But this could be like a basic structure that I add Megascans to, and you can put a material on it pretty easily. It's got a material channel. If you look in the details, there's a materials channel, and we could go and find a Megascans material to put on it. Now, for this particular one, I do have a material, a surface I could use from Megascans. It's a corrugated metal sheet. And if I drag that onto the material here, sorry, drag it onto the material here, it looks okay. Might want to look for something else. Probably this needs to be more like 0.2. Yeah, it doesn't look great. I'd probably find something else. Tint that a little bit. And take a look at it in game. So to make this look better, other than a material, I might want to, of course, have a door, possibly see if I can find some windows to stick in there, and also some piled up snow, maybe on the roof and on the sides. Maybe some old barrels and things, if this is like a storage shack, something like that. Now, there is a static mesh here for this object that you can find by clicking on the folder next to the static mesh that's plugged in. It'll take you to where it is. And you could try turning on nanite support for that. There it goes. It took a while for it to update. Lost the material for a second. And we can see that that's nanite now. Okay, any questions about the stuff that I covered today? I'm gonna go ahead and stop this recording so that I can process it and get it uploaded.